Good morning, everyone. My name is Harpreet Singh. I'm a PhD student. Today, I'm here to present my presentation with the title Comparative Sensory Evaluation of A&W brand and Barks Root Beers. So, moving on to the outline, this is the outline for today's presentation with introduction, hypothesis, materials and methods with experimental design, objective and subjective test, statistical analysis, results, and then conclusion. So moving to introduction, root beer, it has been a popular carbonated soft drink with unique flavor profile. And the popular brands in the market are A&W, Fago, and Barks. So to evaluate the sensory aspects of these beers, sensory evaluation is used, which helps us to assess consumer preferences and product quality, as it is a critical or a crucial tool in food science. A&W and bark they differ in several ways, as we can talk about the ingredients to their carbonation level and what is their influence to consumer preferences. So these are the two samples that I will be using. A&W, which is available in the market at the price of $1.99, and Barks root beer, which is available at the price of $2.39. So objective of this study is that the study aims to compare A&W and Barks root beers using both subjective and consumer preference tests and objective sensory evaluation methods. So hypothesis will be null hypothesis. There will be no significant difference between both root beers in consumer preference in relation to flavor, taste, acceptance. An alternate hypothesis will be there is significant difference between both the root beers in consumer preference. So moving to materials and methods, for testing, paired comparison test was used. When comparing, this is used basically when we are comparing two samples in sensory evaluation, and in this the panelists are given two samples and they have to identify the specific sensory attributes like sweetness, texture, and that helps them to differentiate between both the samples. So the two samples used will be sample 382, that is A&W, and sample 674, that's Barks root beer. So this is the experimental layout. So root beer, two brands A&W and Barks. Subjective, for which 32 panelists were used, and objective, in which pH meter, refractometer for brisk or sweetness, and colorimeter for the color was used, pH meter for acidity. And for subjective Likert scale and paired comparison test was used. So all the subjective assessment will help us to know about the consumer preference. So setting up for the experiment, so the samples were prepared for 30 plus panelists. So the students selected were randomly selected, and there was no preference on age, sex, race, ethnicity. It was conducted in sensory lab in the afternoon. A QR code was generated and the panelists were asked to answer the questions as according to the survey. And they were provided with one tray with 3 cups, 2 cups of root beer samples, both the samples, and 1 cup of water. And the samples were randomized to prevent order bias. So moving further to objective versus subjective test. For objective test, colorimeter was used. That was used for the color measurement. Brix was measured by using refractometer, and pH meter was used to measure the acidity of the drinks. For the subjective Likert scale, paired comparison test, and preference survey was used. So these were the instruments used for the objective testing, which we can use. The Hunter Lab colorimeter was used. Brix digital refractometer was used for the sweetness, and Ecomet Excel 60 pH meter was used. So for statistical analysis or experiments for the objective were conducted in triplicates. Total panelists were 30. Data analysis using Excel, and significant differences were determined by using t-test. Moving to results. So figure 1 here shows the demographic data of the participants. A, which shows the age. Most of the 62.5% of the panelists were between the age of 18 to 24 years, And B shows the gender, in which the female participants were more, that is 56.3% as compared to the male participants. And C here shows the ethnicity, in which it was black African Americans were 75% and rest were Asians or white Americans. So figure 2 here shows the consumer response to the likeness of the root beer and the brand they prefer. So figure A here shows the likeness, in which 56.3% people responded that they like root beer, and 43.8% said they don't like root beer. And B here shows the brand they prefer, in which 40% of the population liked A&W and 28% liked Bar. But the rest of the population, they had no specific preferences, or they don't even like root beer, or they don't have any preference for any band. So figure 3 here shows the consumer response for likeness, that is a scale of 1 to 5. So for the color 60%, more than 60% of the panelists like the sample 674 for the color, which is like they gave the rating of 4 to 5. 4 means a like a little, and 5 means like very much. So 60% were liking the color of 674, and 56% were liking the color of 382, like for which they gave rating of 4 to 5. So this there was no significant difference between both, and the preference was same. So figure 4 here shows the consumer response for likeness scale. So for taste A, 59% of the population they liked taste of sample 674, whereas 50% of the population liked the taste of sample 382, which shows no significant difference between the both. Figure 5 here shows the consumer response for the flavor. So figure A 5.8 shows the sample 674, in which around 37% of the people they like the flavor of 674 and gave like a little the flavor, and 28% were which liked very much the flavor. And moving to B, sample 382, in which 11 participants or 34% of the panelists, they neither like or nor dislike the sample, that is sample 382. So figure 6 here shows the response to rate. So the consumers, when asked to rate the carbonation, so they for the both the samples, they almost like 56% of them gave a score of 4 to 5 for the carbonation levels. So figure 7 here shows the consumer response for comparison for sweetness and carbonation. For sweetness, the consumers preferred 382 as being more sweeter as compared to 674 sample. Whereas for the carbonation, the consumer again preferred 382 being more carbonated as compared to 674. So these results were significantly different, in which A shows the higher value and B shows the lower value, and the significance was according to the p-value is equal to or less than 0.05, and in this case the p-value was 0.003. Figure 8 here shows the consumer response to overall preference between both the sample. So overall, the panelists they liked 674 sample as compared to 382, which was bark sample, bark root beer. So moving to objective testing, table 1 here shows the colorimetric analysis, in which it was found that the there was no significant difference between the values for the colors, whether it is darkness to lightness or red to green or blue to yellow. So the samples were more towards the dark, as it is represented by the L value, and there was no such significant difference between both of the samples. So table 2 here shows that sweetness and pH analysis, in which the sweetness and of the both the brands was found to be not significantly different, and same results were found for the pH. The pH was found to be slightly acidic as compared for both the samples, and the values here are represented in mean plus minus standard deviation. So to conclusion of the subjective assessment was like more of the individuals they preferred 674 sample, that is bars, when the both samples were presented to them, and more of the individuals they preferred sample 382 being more carbonated and more sweeter when compared to the other sample, that is 674, that was bars. So overall, the panelists they liked less carbonated and less sweeter drink, that was bars, as compared to the other A and W, which was found to be more carbonated and sweeter. Moving to objective testing results. So colorimeter here shows that the lightness is closer to the black for both the samples, and it's on the green and yellow color axis. So for the bricks, there was no significant difference between sweetness level of both the samples. So both the samples were having equal sweetness level, that was around 11, yeah, 11 bricks value. And for the pH, both the samples were found to be slightly acidic. So overall, there was no such significant difference between both. And the preference was more towards 674, that was bark. So these are my references. Thank you.